Together, this is the team that has been both behind the scenes and in the media fighting to bring to light what SMC is doing to stop us from hosting the show. Missing today also is my other partner who is in New York. Unfortunately, you can make it down, Mr. Egbert Romain. It is with a very sad heart that I address you this morning. At the outset, let me state for the record that I have a grave concern for the state of affairs in Grenada as it relates to carnival and culture on a whole. The statutory body that has been selected to run carnival in Grenada has demonstrated that it's completely inept and unable to run carnival effectively. Since February of 2012, I wrote the body regarding hosting of our annual show, White in the Moonlight, on Carnival Saturday night. A response that was supposed to take 1 week, as indicated by SNC, took approximately over two months, about 2.5 months. And that response only came after I had written as much as 3 letters. In March of this year, SMC had a promoters meeting where they called for partnership. I called on Mr. Dow seeking some clarification as to what does the partnership entail. I got no clarification from Mr. Dow. He basically told me that they were leaving it up to the promoters to come up with ideas and suggestions for the framework for the partnership. I told him this made absolutely no sense and that the Spice Mass Corporation does not know what they're doing. Why would a private promoter develop ideas, come up with ideas, and then turn it over to Spice Mass Corporation? Around the middle of April, Spice Mass Corporation informed us that they had deemed our show White in the Moonlight to have competing interests with Fantastic Saturday or Panorama, and hence they could not allow us to have the show. In one of my previous letters, I had offered the Spice Mass Corporation $10,000 upfront and 5% of our profit. No mention, however, was made in the denial letter in regards to my offer for partnership. Let it be clear that I didn't have to make this offer to Spice Mass Corporation, but I did so in the best interest of culture and for further development. After several frustrating conversations with Spice Mass Corporation and particularly with Mr. Dow, nothing much was achieved. I retained an expert advisor and legal counsel, and only then did we make some headway with Spice Mass Corporation. But even at that point, they had adopted such a draconian and totalitarian and cynical attitude that whatever progress was being made was very minimal. Mr. Dow often speaks of the Spice Mass bill and its drawing from St. Vincent's carnival legislation. I was saddened. How could this be a proud moment in Grenada's culture? I had always seen carnival activity in Grenada right next to that of those in Trinidad and Tobago, who we all know is the mecca of carnival in the region. How come Grenada was now drawing insights about carnival from an island that has only one nightclub? As a young lad in GBSS during the 1980s, I always envisioned Grenada as being the forefront of the OECS for carnival and cultural activities. Primarily, we were the de facto leader, next to Trinidad, as I stated earlier. I guess Mr. Dow and his cohorts view us as being positioned differently, perhaps somewhere close to the very bottom. As time passed, I informed Mr. Dow that there were rumblings of another soccer show being held in the stadium on the same night as Panorama. He vehemently denied that, and in his words, not true. In another conversation when I presented some facts, Mr. Dow decided to come partially clean and said they, meaning SMC, had decided to partner with a local promoter to do a soca show. I immediately cried foul and asked, how could you attempt to stop our show yet you're giving another promoter the green light to do this, a show on the same night. Something smelled very fishy to me at that point. Mr. Doe told me White in the Moonlight is a fete, and a fete isn't part of Carnival, and he's not mandated to protect fetes. The only components of Carnival that requires protecting, according to him, are mass, pan, and calypso, not soca fete. That was very shocking to me. I then asked, what's the classification for the show that SMC was partnering to do on Saturday night? Mr. Doe did not respond. It must also be noted that during a call with Mr. Doe in early June, I told him that I was contacted by a band manager and a promoter from Trinidad in regards to an all-inclusive fete being held in St. George's on Carnival Sunday, the March Gras night as we call it. Mr. Doe once again vehemently denied any knowledge of such fete in front of 12 witnesses that was on the conference call with us. And he stated that no one had contacted him or Spice Mass Corporation in regards to this Sunday fete. Immediately after the press conference, within a week, an email dated May 7, 2012 surfaced showing an exchange of dialogue between a local hotel manager and Mr. Doe, discussing the same all-inclusive fete, which he said he had no knowledge about. It was at that point that I came to accept that the corporation has been masquerading and lying to us, the promoters, and the Grenadian public all along. It became evident to us that a backroom deal was cut to stop White in the Moonlight so that the other soca show with another private promoter could take place in the stadium on Carnival Saturday night. On Tuesday, June 5th, during a conference call with some Spice Mass Corporation members, myself, my legal counsel, and my other partners, Mr. Doe suggested that we move White in the Moonlight to Carnival Monday night. And I literally thought it was a trick. How could the Spice Mass Corporation that professed to protect mass be actually suggesting to us to compete with Monday Night Mass? Monday Night Mass is a big part of Carnival celebration and one of the mainstays of the Carnival season. Once again, Spice Mass Corporation motive and judgment was called into question. We can't compete with Pan, yet there was Spice Mass Corporation encouraging us to compete with Monday Night Mass. We rejected the suggestion. What the Spice Mass Corporation had not realized was that we were made clever to their ways and their true intentions by a source who had alerted us 3 weeks prior of the googly Mr. Doe and his Spice Mass Corporation were about to bowl us. In fact, both in Grenada and in Trinidad, promoters of the new show were stating that Spice Mass Corporation would make us move White in the Moonlight to Carnival Monday. We conveyed that we had learned that of such moves to Mr. Doe, who tried in vain to assure me this option was only discussed a week prior to him suggesting to me. I know that was untrue, because 3 weeks prior to that, I got a call from Grenada that this was a suggestion that they were coming up with. Yet Mr. Doe said to me, no, we have only discussed that a week before, so there's no way you could have heard it 3 weeks prior. In fact, members of the Spice Mass Corporation even suggested moving Soca Monarch from the usual Friday night to Saturday night. And then we can have the show on Saturday night after Soca Monarch finishes at 1 a.m. This was ludicrous. I love Soca Monarch. I go to every Soca Monarch, and I've yet to go to a Soca Monarch that finishes at 1 a.m. According to the plan, the constellation would have been shifting Panorama from Saturday night to Friday night. After some more debating and talk, SMC finally relented, started feeling good. They agreed for White in the Moonlight to happen only if we paid them $135,000 in cash upfront to be fully paid 2 weeks in advance of the hosting of White in the Moonlight. Frankly, we considered this to be another practical joke. Unfortunately, as far as we were concerned, to them, though it was not, they believed this is a serious offer. I was both shocked and bewildered. Where could such an unrealistic number come from? We were really unclear, so we again inquired of who else? Mr. Dow. Now, Mr. Dow's logic is that he believes about 6,000 patrons would attend Moonlight City. I'm not a mathematician. I only passed CXC Maths in Form 4 in GBSS, and I did 2 years of A-level Maths in IFE. But if you have 6,000 people, and we charge $50 to enter the venue, you would only come up with a gate receipts of about $300,000. I then asked Mr. Dow how much he believed the bars would make. He didn't have an answer. So I said, in reality, if the bar gross is $80,000, that gives us a total of around $380,000, of which Spice Mass Corporation wants 1/3 upfront. That begs the question, how would we pay for the band, the artists, the 100 of local workers, plus the VAT and the withholding tax, if we had to give Spice Mass Corporation $135,000? Clearly, this would leave us at a great loss. It did not escape us that the carnival launched on June 2nd, that there was no advertisement for Panorama. Yet the private promoter was able to place several times an advertisement for the soca show in the stadium on Panorama night. What was the real truth, Spice Mass Corporation? Were you attempting to stop White in the Moonlight to help Panorama? Or was the real reason that Spice Mass Corporation planned to stop White in the Moonlight is that they could facilitate their friends and their psychopaths with a monopoly by having no competing show on Carnival Saturday night? It is time for Spice Mass Corporation to come clean and stop treating us as second-class citizens and as puppets. Mr. Dow and the Spice Mass Corporation, get real and let the people know why it's so important to stop the show that was created and developed to bring joy and pleasure to a vast amount of freedom-loving people in a proper social environment. The deceit and deception are like nothing I've ever seen. There is nothing to indicate why both shows cannot go on simultaneously. Over the years, we've given the fan community the respect and not start our show until after the competition has finished. We are aware that there are persons in North America and the Caribbean that are canceling their vacation plans because of the dictatorship standard taken by the SMC. But I would like to say today, I encourage people in the Caribbean and North America to still come to Grenada for Carnival regardless of what the outcome is. Let's come to Grenada and have fun and enjoy ourselves the way we know we can do. I'm very confident that before the season commences in full, Mr. Dow and SMC would recognize their follies and make the necessary corrections. All my friends will still be visiting Grenada this year. White in the Moonlight would be very special this year once Spice Mass Corporation recognizes the importance of having the show. This is about Grenada and serving the citizens and friends of Grenada honorably and honestly. When I grew up in Grenada, a man's word was his bond. Please come clean once and for all and stop spoiling we mass, Mr. Dow. Carnival is not just about mass, pan, and calypso, but it also includes plenty liming and fete. Yes, fetes are part of Carnival. Yes, Mr. Chairman, White in the Moonlight is a part of the Carnival experience too. The Carnival experience is whatever we, the citizens, want it to be. Carnival is we think, and it's a visionary thinking and openness that will be responsible for making a successful Carnival, not archaic and draconian policies from a bygone epoch in history. In all this, we do not care what we have heard about the Spice Mass Corporation members resigning en masse. Protecting the rights of our people, those who take risks, our businesses and our people are far more noble considerations. Mr. Dow and his cohorts have done nothing for Grenada's carnival since 2009, except insult and infuriate the Panmen one year and the Calypsonians another year. This year, they're continuing to hold Carnival 2012 hostage by insulting the public's knowledge by hiding the truth. They continue to try to hide behind the Pan, but we know, based on documentation that we have, that the Pan has little to do with their designs. The people of St. Patrick's, St. Andrews, St. David's, St. Mark's, St. George's, Carriacou and Petit Matnick should also know that Mr. Dow and his colleagues tried to move the show from Moonlight City to St. George's. We refuse and ask them if the people in the outer parishes don't deserve to have activities, and pointed out that the people of the outer parishes enjoy coming to Moonlight City. This has been a very sad episode for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would just like to say that this is almost as a national crisis. It's nothing personal. There is no personal beef between myself and any member of the Spice Mass Corporation. This is about culture, and this is about Grenada.
Good morning. It is always a pleasure to be here with members of the press corps and of course with dear friends. I think my role is to take the baton where Nimrod left it by re-emphasizing that this is in fact a very sad development for our country. And I think it's also a sad development outside of what Nimrod calls culture. It's a sad development for me, and I think at the end of my 5-minute presentation you'd get a sense for us all, because one would have thought that we were beyond these issues. The way I want to make my remarks really is to go at the core of some of this. And the core of some of this requires that we go to the Spice Mass Corporation bill. I have looked at the documentation, both from the Spice Mass Corporation, and I have also looked at the documentation from the presentation that they had with the artists and also with the promoters. There are a number of things I think we need to clarify, and the best way to do that is to start by saying that to my mind I think we have a major contradiction between the bill, and what it portends to do, and the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which enshrines the commitment of countries in CARICOM to the liberalization of services. And I want to take that back by saying, when we formed the integration movement and developed it over the years, one of the aspirations is that we would be able to exercise our right to free services. So you could provide services anywhere in this common space that is called CARICOM. You must understand that at that stage there were no exceptions. So when the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas became law and it was taken into law in Grenada, your rights were enshrined in this treaty, subject to certain conditions, that being only that you're a CARICOM national. Whether you wanted to provide this service in Guyana, Suriname, or Belize, or Jamaica, it was a right that you had as a CARICOM national. And in the treaty, which gave you, and certainly myself and everyone here in the community, free access to provide services, There was absolutely nothing in the treaty that said that you couldn't provide medical services or you couldn't provide entertainment or cultural services. In short, there was absolutely no exceptions. And that's the first point I want to make so that you understand this. Now, in 2006, I think, all of this became law in Grenada, so that the revised treaty properly became part of our body of law. But even before it became law, there was an appreciation that once the heads of government agree to these commitments regarding the common market, the single market and economy, that they would immediately be applicable to any one of us so we could enjoy it. So it meets both criteria of being immediately applicable and also becoming part of Grenada's law. Now, when you read the Spice Mass Corporation's presentation, and I want to be very clear on their presentation, I've looked at it, I've heard it, and I've asked various people who attended their presentations to explain it to me. And I've looked at their presentation as well to the promoters. What the Spice Mass Corporation interprets from the bill, from the act, is that it means that the corporation has the authority to what I would call carve out, to take out the provision of services during Carnival based on what they perceive as the act giving them the authority to do. I want to see that Deacon can get into this later, but I want to send you a very clear signal this morning that there is no act that we can sign in Grenada that undermines your rights in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. I want you to understand me, because if it ever happens to you anywhere, as has happened to the lady in Barbados, Miss Myrie, as has happened to other people, there is nothing that we can do in domestic law that can undermine your rights in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The revised treaty is an international treaty. There is also an understanding by heads, and therefore we need to ask the question, can the Spice Mass Corporation Act legally, properly, take out part of the services market, entertainment services, during Carnival, and say to anyone that we have the right, as it were, to manage, to supervise, and to allocate this part of the market during the Carnival season? And the answer to that is no. So that there is a major problem between, I want to be clear, what the Spice Mass Corporation says it has the power to do, and the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. And where there are these contradictions, there is a clear understanding in international law that the treaty stands. The treaty stands. So the first thing you need to go away with is that the Spice Mass Corporation's explanation runs up against the treaty, and that your rights in the treaty not to have anyone, anywhere, take out part of the market at any point during the year, that cannot stand. You have that right, and it's supreme. The second thing is, you need to hear what the treaty says. Article 36 of the treaty. Article 36 of the treaty makes it clear. The Spice Mass Corporation bill was in 2010. We took all of this revised treaty stuff into law in 2006. Article 36, which is on the prohibition of new restrictions, so it means coming after 2006, if they wanted to do this, it would be classified as a new restriction because you were not restricted before. It says member states shall not introduce any new restrictions on the provision of services in the community by nationals of other member states except as otherwise provided for. And the except as otherwise provided for the avoidance of any doubt is very clear. You can only do it if, for instance, it makes it clear there is a threat to national security. So there is something where someone wants to engage in a services sector that basically threatens your national security. And even so, there are procedures that you go through. So it's a new restriction, and you can't put that restriction in place. That's the second point I want to make. The third point I want to make is very simply this. In relation to what we call other countries. If other countries, and Grenada was not one of those because I sat with Oliver Joseph and others and we negotiated this. We had no restrictions. But where other countries had restrictions, and I want to give you this so when you leave, we don't have to do a ding-dong, a ping-pong match on this. If Grenada had restrictions in place, the treaty would have given Grenada 1 year to remove it. So we're not talking about any other permutation. It's either fish or fowl. And it wasn't fish, so it's fowl. So if it didn't exist, fine. If it did exist, you have 1 year to remove it. So we all covering the same ground here. That right remains. It says in Article 37 that in establishing the program, priority should be given to services, removing restrictions on services which directly affect, and they go on here, the generation of foreign exchange earnings. That's important because Spice Mass Corporation predicates its presentation on foreign exchange. And what the treaty says is, look, these are precisely the kinds of sectors you need to open up if you had a restriction. But I did tell you Grenada had none. And this is just by way of giving you a clear explanation so that no one, we're not going to be engaged in a two-day battle on this. Your rights are supreme. So if your rights are supreme, and if in fact your rights cannot be disturbed by the Spice Mass Corporation Act, some of the discussions I heard up to this morning on Spice Mass Corporation interfacing with what I consider to be immigration procedures, to my mind, I have to look in the treaty to find that. And I want to say the following to you so that we're very clear this morning. The treaty is absolute on how we should go about treating with the entry of persons to provide services. And the place for us to look in relation to that is Article 45 on the movement of community nationals. And I want to say the following because it's come up before. Without prejudice to the rights recognized and agreed to be accorded by member states, in Article 32, 33, 37, 38, 40, among themselves and to the community nationals, member states have agreed, listen to the following, and undertake as a first step towards achieving the goals set out in Articles 45, to accord to the following categories of community nationals the right to seek employment in their jurisdictions. And the first category is university workers. The second category relates to you, media workers. You can go anywhere in the community and you can seek employment, and no government at any point during the year can tell you no once you have met the administrative procedures. And the third category is sports persons. And the fourth category are artists. So if the treaty gives you the right to move as an artist, how then can that coexist with someone saying you have to get a work permit? And the answer to that is simple. Once you're a CARICOM national and you have a CARICOM skills certificate, no one can stop you from moving. The discretion that a government has, it essentially gave up when it joined its own consensus with other countries in this area. So for instance, if it's Machel Montano or KES or Steel Pulse or Third World, once they have a skills certificate and they present themselves to immigration, no one can say to them, you need a work permit. In short, all of the talk about whether Spice Mass Corporation does or does not have the authority to say to the immigration services who and who should not get work permits, that is inappropriate. Deacon will talk about the domestic law, whether the Immigration Act provides for it. But what I've just said to you is that the treaty says that if you are a CARICOM artist, you can go anywhere in CARICOM and work without anyone having to seek a work permit for you. That's absolute. So telling promoters that if you don't do this, I'm not going to give you a work permit, runs up against the treaty. I want to repeat, it runs up against the treaty, and the treaty's rights are supreme where that is concerned. I want to repeat, this is taken from Article 46 of the treaty. It's absolute, and I have checked. All of these provisions have been imported into domestic law in Grenada. you then have to ask the question, if all that I say that's supported by the treaty is so, then how come we're having all of these various discussions which seem to contradict the treaty? Deacon will have to speak about how they deal with those contradictions in domestic law. My role is to say to you that based on what I have read, and I have a very serious concern about whether the Act really does say what I've heard people say it says. But if it did say that, it would run up against the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. And your provisions, the provisions that you have in here in terms of rights, are absolute. And to the press I say, do not let anyone tamper with these rights. Whether it's in Grenada, whether it's in Barbados or Trinidad, we have given up and sacrificed tremendously for these rights. And these are rights you should stand by. The last thing has to do with the fact that there's some cross-talk about whether there is an arrangement between Spice Mass Corporation and a promoter to have a show on the same night that the Spice Mass Corporation intended to have the show on. The Moonlight City show. And the treaty is also clear on some of these things. The treaty says you cannot discriminate as among nationals in the same country. But it goes further. You cannot discriminate as against nationals in other community states, and I can get you the provisions on these things. Right? They're all here. So that there is no sense in which the Spice Mass Corporation legally, in the context of the treaty, could have a monopoly to say who can or can't do a show at any particular point during the year. Because if that were the case, figure media workers, you want to go to Belize to do something, and someone in Belize say you can't come between January and February, and then you want to go to Suriname, and someone in Suriname says you can't come between March and April. So that's where we are. So these are the points I wanted to leave with you, and we can have the discussion. Deacon can speak to some of the domestic law. I can say a lot more, but I want to be very clear that a lot of what I've heard runs up against the treaty, and it simply cannot stand. Because where there are contradictions, the treaty rules supreme. Thank you.
I just want to make fun. Thanks. I want to make a couple of points, and I want to start by saying first, the promoters of the show never wished for this to happen, and to a large extent that is the reason why there was always communication between the promoters and the Spice Mass Corporation as to what the intention of the promoters were. And when the Spice Mass Corporation would have called a meeting of promoters or invited certain people to meet and indicated that the Spice Mass Corporation was seeking partnership with those promoters and leaving it up to the promoters to decide the nature of the partnership. You have to understand that for a lot of the promoters, they would have gone to that meeting without having taken any legal advice. Most of them probably would not have read the bill, and even if they read the bill, would still have needed legal advice as to what the rights and obligations of the Spice Mass Corporation is in relation to Carnival and private promoting. And essentially, a lot of the promoters would have been left with the impression that effectively they needed the permission of the Spice Mass Corporation to have a Carnival event. And to a large extent, the Spice Mass Corporation seems to be selling the idea that the hosting of Carnival events is a matter that it is responsible for, and that is not the case according to the Spice Mass Corporation Act. What the Act gives the Spice Mass Corporation the power to do is to say that if you wish to use a venue that is declared a Carnival venue by the Minister of Culture, then you need our permission to use that venue. And that is the only thing you require to apply to the Spice Mass Corporation for. No, the Minister of Culture has not yet in fact declared any Carnival venues. So strictly speaking, promoters do not need at this stage to even apply to the Spice Mass Corporation for permission to host anything. That's the first point. And let me say the second. There is nothing really novel or new in the Spice Mass Corporation bill as it pertains to Carnival that didn't de facto exist already. Last year, the Minister of Culture declared venues as Carnival venues. There's already precedent for this. And those venues are generally the public venues which are either owned or operated by different arms of the state. Whether it's, for example, the National Stadium, Canteen Recreation Ground, or the playing fields and so on, which would be under the control of the Ministry of Sports. So essentially what the Act was saying is that during Carnival, if those venues are declared as Carnival venues, then the entity you seek permission from to use that venue is the Spice Mass Corporation. Now, there's an express statement, and it reads, subject to section 3, a person may hold a carnival, festival, or activity in any place outside the area declared under subsection 20. Subsection 20 is the area that the Minister of Culture declares. It doesn't say a person has to apply to get a license. It says the opposite. It says you may host it as long as it is not a venue declared by the Minister of Culture. And that essentially is what the application process is about in relation to the Spice Mass Corporation. Now, there is a section which says a person may not be granted permission or may not host an event or be granted permission if the Spice Mass Corporation deems the event to have competing interests. The question one has to ask is this. If you have one section which says you can host an event outside of a declared carnival event without requiring the Spice Mass Corporation permission, how do you reconcile that with the statement which says if the event is competing, you may not host it? And the answer is simple. It has to be an event which you are seeking to have in a venue that is declared a carnival venue. And this is a fundamental issue because in effect what Spice Mass Corporation is in effect saying to private businesses like Bananas where we're here, or to Spice Basket in Bolio, or to the people at Fantasia, or to Mr. Peters in Moonlight City, is that during Carnival, even if you can't have any activities in your private place, they're coming to us. So the private persons who worked hard, who built up their businesses, who've invested, effectively is being told that during Carnival, sorry, the only entity that is going to be allowed either to make money or to make money on our terms with the Spice Mass Corporation. And that interpretation is not what was intended by this Act. And the Act itself goes on to say nothing in the Act restricts or prohibits or interferes with the use of private real property. And it couldn't be otherwise, because in effect to tell you can't use your private property would be in effect be taking away your private property. And thankfully under our constitution, the right to private property is still tantamount. So it is regrettable that, notwithstanding that they are not entitled, let me make that clear, they're not entitled to demand from any private promoter money. That's the first thing. They are not entitled to demand the payment of money to allow private promoters to host events. They are not. They're not a taxing authority. They're not a licensing authority. They haven't been given the power to say if you want a license, the fee is $5 or $10. And if that has to happen, then you would find regulations would have to be made under the Act. You would have to publish it and say to promoters, if you want to have the use of canteen or the stadium or wherever during Carnival, this is the license fee, and that would have to be made part of the law. That has not even happened. So, notwithstanding that, White in the Moonlight, in an attempt to continue a harmonious relationship, has made a number of concessions. We said one, from the outset, before we were even aware that there was the potential of another fete taking place on the same night in the stadium after Panorama, that they were prepared to pay $10,000 to the Spice Mass Corporation and to offer 5% of the profits of the show. They never responded. They never acknowledged that they were considering it. They never counter-proposed. We had a lengthy attempt at trying to resolve the matter. We had a mediation session. The offer was up to $15,000. They rejected it. We gave a commitment to start the show at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. And when we say start the show, we mean actually open the gates at 2 a.m. They gave a commitment there'd be no DJ music, no bar, no entertainment of any sort until 2 a.m. They accepted that, but on condition that $135,000 was paid to them. So it begs the question, what is the motive? What is the reasoning behind the behavior of the Spice Mass Corporation? And again, the suggestions about moving the dates, all of the dates given, Rainbow City weekend. Now mind you, they may not be responsible for protecting or promoting Rainbow City, but I think everybody knows Rainbow City is a festival that's unique to St. Andrews. Yet still they were saying you could compete with Rainbow City. We indicated to them that was not possible because the band would not have been available and they were not contracted for the Rainbow City weekend. They then suggested moving the show to Carnival Monday night. I think Mr. Nimrod dealt with that and the implications of moving the show to Carnival Monday night. But again, if we wanted to be fair and forget all of the legalese, their claim is that they wish to protect Panorama. The question one has to ask is, can they prove that White in the Moonlight is in fact a competing event with Panorama? And I think the answer overwhelmingly is no. But if it was, if a Soca Fete or Soca Fetes were the activities that had caused Panorama to either not make money over the years and so on, how do you correct that by having another Soca Fete in the same venue immediately after Panorama? It has nothing to do with Pan. So we are to some extent still at a loss as to why we've ended up where we've ended up, why the Spice Mass Corporation seems unwilling to accept that it's an error on their part, to gladly agree and to encourage that the show takes place, and to accept the generous offers that have been made by the promoters of White in the Moonlight, even though they are not entitled to do so. And finally, because I believe some of the Spice Mass Corporation folks have said they too don't understand why there is a controversy, because all they did was ask that we move the date. But I would think if one wanted to be fair, given that White in the Moonlight has occurred on the same date for how long now?
8 years.
For at least 8 years. Given that the Spice Mass Corporation and their show is the new kid on the block, I would have thought that if one had to make a compromise, that one would have said, fine, given that you already have established that date effectively as your show, given that you would have had a legitimate expectation that you would get that date to have your show, and given that the CEO of the Spice Mass Corporation, I believe it was on Flow, I saw her myself saying to the promoters, you have nothing to worry about. If the CEO is telling you as the promoter that you have nothing to worry about, I think the only conclusion you will draw is that your show will be permitted to take place. Yet still 2 days after the letter was written saying you can't have the show and move it. So I think in summary, we are still at a loss as to understand why is it. The Spice Mass Corporation has come to the view that moving White in the Moonlight will save Panorama or will make Panorama more profitable. Because we are firmly of the view that it is not about Pan. I have not heard any of the Pan bands indicate that they've been consulted on the matter, that it was their recommendation to the Spice Mass Corporation that White in the Moonlight was killing Panorama and therefore you need to move it. So whose idea it is that White in the Moonlight should be moved, quote unquote, to facilitate Panorama? And we have serious questions as to whether or not that is the position of the Pan Association, as to whether or not the Pan Association has ever been consulted at all in this process. I think questions.
I think you're right. Let me just say that the one point I want to leave with you is that the only way that this act could be potentially, not in contradiction to the Treaty of Chagaramas is if you look at it in the way that Deacon suggested, which is if you view it as the Spice Mass Corporation having authority over public venues. So that really you're controlling the venue. You're not controlling the access to provide services. And you're not carving out the entire country services sector. Because what you're doing is you're focusing on a couple public venues that you gazette. And you have authority over those public venues anyway. If you look at it that way, then there is a way in which you can begin to understand how the Spice Mass Act and the revised treaty could coexist. If you look at it in the way that the Spice Mass Corporation personnel have spoken to it, I do not want the point to escape you. It runs up against several aspects of the revised treaty and cannot stand. Both things cannot be true. It cannot be that they view the act in the way that they have basically published it. And I have one of their publications here of what they gave to the promoters. One of the promoters sent it to me. The way they published it is misleading. And if this is how they view it, we have a major problem, because it means that if this stands, anyone else, anywhere else can do what Spice Mass Corporation claims to be doing, which is to carve out part of any part of the services sector, whether it's for artists, services, consultants, economists, and that is dangerous. So Deacon's way of looking at it is the only possible way that I think we can look at this from where we stand.
Yes,
I'm taking in all that you have said and you have sought legal advice. So what you're telling me is that you're not legally bound to take any permission from the SNC. So my question is, what's next? What are you going to do?
Well, what next is that we continue to promote the show, and Moonlight City will happen this year, make no doubt about it. We're going to have the show this year.
So in terms of teams and bands and so all that has been contracted already?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have copies of the contract here with me that I can give to you, the media. The band was contracted actually since the show, after the show last year. We knew we were bringing the band back, and I actually signed the contract and paid them since December last year. December of 2011.
So what do you think would happen based on what Dr. Antoine has said and Econ has said? It seems as if, from what I'm gathering, that the whole process or procedure of the SNC has been on the wrong foot. So, what do you think would happen now? Because you were saying that your show will go on. They're saying that you have to get an alternative date, and there is a show advertised, like I heard it myself, for the night. And they're also asking for a significant sum to be paid. What do you think would be the next step?
Well, like I said, I love Mr. Peters could answer that, but the last time I checked is that he didn't tell me that his venue was a carnival venue. I still believe his venue is a private venue, and he's part promoter of White in the Moonlight. It's a team of us, and he owns the venue, but he's part of the promotion for White in the Moonlight, and I don't think it's a carnival venue. We have no problem, like I stated earlier on, with the second show. I actually encourage it, because not everybody would probably want to drive up to the countryside. So we actually should have 2 or 3 shows in St. George's on that night also.
And your financial contribution, your 10,000 EC or US?
Well, actually, I did up it from 10,000 EC to 15,000. So the last time we spoke on June 5th, the offer is, and I let them know clearly. And I want you to understand, we don't have to give them any money. But that was just a contribution. I've given, let's put it this way, I've given the Carnival Committee money over the years. It wouldn't be the first time that I'll be giving them money. I have a copy of the check right back there that I can show you. I've given them money in the past. So, and I will continue to do that, because for me it's about culture, and it's about Grenada. This is not just about White in the Moonlight, it's after White in the Moonlight. Who brings the artists from Grenada to New York and to foreign? Who does that? Why? Because I don't come to the media and say I'm responsible for doing that, but people don't know. So it's not just about White in the Moonlight, it's what happens with what we market after that. Who tries to expose what we have here in Grenada in North America? I cannot take total credit for it, but yes, I'm one of the persons that tried to do that.
So, let's go back to Deacon. Just in case, because the corporation is going to have they're saying about an all-time job. Just in case they try stop. You're saying that you're going ahead. From a legal point of view, what would be the step that you have to take to ensure that nothing can be done to actually stop the progression of that white in the moonlight from Carnival Saturday? Just in case the SMC decides that it cannot happen based on how they interpreted the act, the bill, what it is both of you are speaking about the short while.
But thankfully we live in a free country. In the absence of a court order served on the promoters or on me as counsel for them, saying that the court prohibits White in the Moonlight from taking place. As far as we're concerned, White in the Moonlight is going to take place. And that is why I say this is a fundamental issue. It is not just a simple question. I mean, it's clear. They're not a taxing authority. It is the government that can tax its citizens to provide road and education, etc., etc. Right? They are not the court, so they have no authority to impose fines or fees on anybody. And they are not a licensing authority. They haven't been empowered or given the permission to license carnival events. If they were, in other words, the legislation has been passed and saying certain kinds of activities are deemed to be carnival activities, and if you wish to host a carnival activity, you apply for a license and the license fee is X dollars, like how you apply to get a liquor license or that kind of thing. That would have been fine. And all of the promoters up front would have known what the license fee and the license arrangements are, and would have known, etc., what has to be done. But in the absence of those three things, any offer of payment, and you have to ask yourself this question, you know, I am sure White in the Moonlight is not the only private fete that is going to take place at carnival time. Perhaps it would be instrumental to ask the carnival committee, or the Spice Mass Corporation as they're known now, as to whether they have asked any of these other promoters to pay them money, or have said to them, you shouldn't have your event on that date, have it on another date, etc. So we are clear that in the absence of a court order saying that the event can't happen, that the event will happen. And I want to point one other thing out, which I've pointed out in the interest of trying to indicate to the Spice Mass Corporation that, look, before you hastily go out and start telling people they can't and can't do things, you need to take certain things into consideration. One of which is this. In the Act, it says if a person hosts an event in a declared carnival venue without obtaining the permission of the Spice Mass Corporation, that person commits an offense and is liable on conviction to be fined by the court. Let's follow this logically. Even if someone wanted to break the law by having a fete, say, in the stadium without the permission of the Spice Mass Corporation, and he went ahead and did so, what has to happen is that the police has to arrest that person, charge that person, bring the person before the court. The court will have the same right of due process as everybody else, and if they're found guilty, then they're fined. But that is only in relation to someone who has chosen to have an event in a declared carnival venue without the permission of the Spice Mass Corporation. Outside of that, there is no other provision in the bill which attracts any form of sanction. In other words, there is no other part of the bill which says, for instance, if someone hosts an event which Spice Mass Corporation says is competing with their interests, that they commit an offense or that there is no such other provision. And it begs the question, if the intention of the law was to say that Spice Mass Corporation is a monopoly and they alone can host carnival events, then the Act would have said so. And it doesn't say so, nor can it say so, as I said, because the fundamental right to protection of property, the fundamental right to freedom of movement, the fundamental right to go where you want to, which is why if there are more fetes, the better. The public has a choice, and those are important issues. If you are trying to make carnival bigger and better, why would you want less events? Why would you want to say to people, the only show you can go to is a show in the stadium, and in order to go to the show effectively, you're saying, well, you must come to Panorama. We live in a free country, and if people want to go to Moonlight City, if they want to go to Quarantine Point, or if they want to go to Fantasia, people should be permitted to do so. And as I said, so in the absence of a court order, we are clear that there's nothing in the Act which gives the Spice Mass Corporation any authority to in fact tell people they can't have shows outside of shows in particular venues.
Let me just say something to strengthen Deacon's point. You see, this is what we have difficulties with. This is the presentation from Spice Mass Corporation, and it leaves no stone unturned in terms of interpretation. This says that the corporation will exercise its rights of exclusivity from Carnival Wednesday. So Spice Mass Corporation is saying to the region that they have a monopoly on Carnival. And I mean, think about how ludicrous that would be if someone outside of this country were to sit down objectively and reason through this. You know, you're talking about outside of Grenada, someone hearing that a promoter in Grenada who had an event during Carnival, yes, was arrested and charged $50,000 if the interpretation of the cooperation is correct. We're saying that they do not have any exclusivity, that the Act does not give them any monopoly power. And we are calling on you as the media, and we hope that this message gets to the regional press, because we see this as a large issue. Nimron said it. This issue is one that has to do with rights that we negotiated. This has to do with your rights as media workers. This is not just about a little carnival fit. This has to do with rights that you have. And someone can't say anywhere that they've given these monopoly rights, as this is what this says. They can't give these monopoly rights to any organization in Barbados or Trinidad, so you can't go in and do what you need to do. This is what this is saying. And we are a little concerned as well about how this whole thing could have gone through. You know, several readings of it without serious questions being raised. Readings meaning in the Senate and then in the House. Because to my mind, even if we took sorry?
I have to say questions were raised.
Questions were raised.
Questions were raised.
I'm advised by legal counsel that questions were raised, but it was still passed. Yeah? So this is a draconian piece of legislation. And I think what we have to do is to try and find a way for us to work together to resolve it. I don't think anybody feels that the people in Spice Mass Corporation are evil men and women. What we have is the misinterpretation without people thinking through on what the implications of this are. And I feel personally attached to this because I tried to bring Ronnie McIntosh here, you would remember, in 2002 when Mr. McQueen was Minister of Culture. And I had some of the same angst, but there was no bill, and we had it came down to the wire, and finally he landed here on the night of the event, and it impacted the event. Bobby, I think, would remember very well, we had it up at Mount Helicon. And it's so ludicrous because if you start applying these things in this way, you're going to affect the entire region's cultural development. As it turns out, Ronnie McIntosh's father happened to be from Carriacou. So here we were trying to stop someone from whose father is Carriacouan from coming into Grenada because we want to develop the culture, so to speak. Last comment. I can think about 10 ways in which if you gave me Panorama, I can think about 10 different ways I could have Panorama doing well, thriving and jumping without putting any restrictions in place. And if Spice Mass Corporation wants to give us that charge, we are prepared to take it. I would like nothing better than to work with colleagues in making Panorama something where you don't need to keep trying to protect it and restrict, and we need to move out of that. And I did say the final comment, but let me just make one more. The implications of this for our artists are also severe, because I have fought for Grenadian artists in Trinidad when it comes to some of what I hear in the background. And this is precisely the period when in every single festival in CARICOM, this is when you're going to want to have artists come into your space. This is when artists find an opportunity to work, whether it's in St. Vincent or St. Lucia or Barbados or Guyana. It's when they have a festival. So just on the sort of, raising a flag side of things, if we allowed this, and when it's Mashramani in Guyana or Trinidad has Carnival or Barbados has Crop Over, people can't go in and ply services freely, then I think we start seeing the implications for us. And to my mind, I think we need to look cautiously at what we are doing from that standpoint as well. There's room for us to reach consensus on this. We're not here at loggerheads with anybody, but we are very sure on the rights of which we're standing.
So Oliver, George Barnett, what is the history of your relationship with Spice Mass Corporation? And is there anything in the past that could have given rise to that? What's going on today?
Like I said, I perceive as always having an amicable relationship with Spice Mass Corporation. Actually, myself and the chairman, we both sat A levels together. We went to IFE together, and I don't think we had a bad relationship. We
But is there anything you can allude to that would give rise to the present situation?
No, nothing that I can pinpoint. And actually, I was just sitting here thinking, and it's interesting that that would even come to light this year, given the fact that we have a homecoming this year. And you would think with an event, not saying that, you know, my event or our event is the best event, but I would think it's a good enough event that I was actually expecting much more support from Spice Mass Corporation this year, given the fact that we have a homecoming and we're expecting a vast number of visitors to come to the country this year. Living in North America, or in the US, there hasn't, since the contention with Spice Mass Corporation, there haven't been a day where I don't get at least 10 to 20 phone calls with people telling me they're not buying a ticket. Personally, last year I had 12 friends that live in North America. They're all Trinidadians. They came down here to visit for the first time and was all banked and coming back this year. So far, only one has purchased their ticket. Because, you know, people basically saying, well, that's one of the better shows, that they went to one of the best shows and they want to come for the show. So if the show is not happening, they're not coming.
Would you say that White in the Moonlight has been successful over the years, and that success could breed some level of?
Well, it depends on how you define success. But if you define success in terms of putting out a good product where people come and enjoy themselves and having a time, yeah, that's yes, it has done that. It has achieved that.
I need to ask you this. Is this a fight among the telecommunication people in terms of for instance, Digital supports White in the Moonlight and Lime is the platinum sponsor of the carnival activities, and as you know, White in the Moonlight is one of the bigger shows for carnival. So do you think somewhere in between there that could be part of the problem?
Well, I'm quite sure that it is. No one at Spice Mass Corporation hasn't told me it. As a matter of fact, I sent out sponsorship letters since January, the end of January, going into February this year, and to date, not one sponsor has even answered and saying, yeah, we're on board. I haven't even said, you know, it's what we promoted White in the Moonlight. So I don't, even though Digicel has been there with us and supported us over the years, you know, yeah, we are loyal to Digicel, but to date, Digicel haven't even committed and said, yeah, they're sponsoring the show. I have no contract with anyone. With that being said, you know, I have no contract. It's not affecting the plans that we have for the show. With that being said, prior to all of this, sometime in March, I did get a call, not from any representative from Lime, I want to make that clear, but someone claiming that they spoke to someone in Lime, and Lime was very much interested in the show. I couldn't commit or talk to anybody because no representative from Lime did call me. But I did get indication that they were interested in the show, and I said, well, we have people that we worked with over the years, and I haven't really confirmed anything with them yet. So, yeah.
So apart from yourself, would you say that the White in the Moonlight has been bringing economic benefits to the community of La Poultry?
Most definitely, not just the community of La Poultry. Just in my village of Grandmont last year, I employed 45 young guys just from the village of Grandmont. And Mr. Peters could speak to the number of employment in the area of Moonlight City. Yeah, the police department alone, we hired about 45 police last year. Just, you know, where we had to pay them. I had, like I said, 45 young guys that got employment, and they were all paid just from the village of Grandmont. You have other bar workers, you have the busmen, you have the truckmen. So a number of people, as we would say, eat the food off of Moonlight City.
There are follow-up events which, I mean, this is important, that events. Carnival isn't meant to be in the national stadium. You may have particular events that take place in the stadium, but Carnival is a national event. So when White in the Moonlight takes place, let's be real, there are events which piggyback off of White in the Moonlight. Some of you may have heard about places like the Cow Pen and so on. The Cow Pen doesn't happen, White in the Moonlight doesn't happen. It's people coming from White in the Moonlight that goes to the Cow Pen, it's local, by the riverside, it's eating local food, it's wicked. People who organize and have that event, they too get the economic benefits. So while the Spice Mass Corporation, rightfully, we have concerns about paying for panorama, Panorama has always been an event, and I think has always challenged everybody who's run Carnival to pay for it. But you can't say you're going to pay for it by telling everybody else you can't have your event. It will not work. And really, there is no empirical evidence to suggest that even if, let's be real, there are questions that you have to ask. What's the age group of the people who go to White in the Moonlight? Even if you told them there is no White in the Moonlight, would they go to Panorama? In its current format? Which is the real question. The question is, what should Spice Mass Corporation be doing? Who should they be engaged? Who should they be talking to about how we correct the challenges we have with Panorama? I can think of one, for example. Maybe you should have Panorama in the day, not in the night.
Absolutely.
I think you're more likely to go with your family and look at people play pan, because you would actually see people playing pan. If you go to Panorama in the night, you can't see.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
You can't see,
absolutely.
you can't hear.
A million ways.
There are a lot of things which, in my view, if it was about addressing the shortfalls or the challenges we face with pan. For example, pan is essentially played by young people. To me, you're better off encouraging the schools and those kinds of things to take pan. Pan is extremely expensive. If the hotels and the steams and so on don't sponsor the pan band, Panorama can't happen. So I'm saying I would have thought, in an attempt to save Panorama, that's the kind of discussion you need to have.
Yes.
The people who sponsor pan, the people who play pan, and the communities in which the pan bands are located. Not by picking some random fet and saying this fet doesn't happen and that fet doesn't happen. And until in my view, that kind of discussion takes place, and really and truly it's unfortunately doing what we do at Carnival, which is making back
yes. Yes.
And we must also point out that that's one of the biggest fet that happens in it's one of the biggest fet that happened by Mr. Peters. And you know, it's troubling. He called me in New York one day, pretty upset. That you know, somebody affiliated with the government actually asked him, what does he stand? What does he stand to gain or lose if the show is held there on that night? You know, what does he have to benefit by having the show there on that night? You know, I mean, there you have a private entrepreneur doing something, and someone even asking him, well, what does he stand to benefit? And the answer is obvious. If it's one of the biggest nights, it's something he's been doing for a number of years, providing a service. Listen, the experience in White in the Moonlight, I don't think we could even try to create it anywhere else, because those of us that live in St. George's, tell me one venue that you actually would put white clothes on and go to the venue, pray for the rain to fall, pray for rain to fall, and then roll in the mud with your white clothes. I mean, I haven't seen that nowhere in St. George's. So if we can recreate that somewhere in St. George's, then maybe, you know.
Question here. So what can fans look forward to on that night specifically?
Well, fans can actually look forward for a very great show. Like I said before, I have no doubt in my mind that White in the Moonlight would happen. We had Kes the band last year. They performed awesomely. It was a great performance. We're bringing them back this year. We have a few other regional artists in the Caribbean that we'll be bringing also. And I know there's questions as to whether or not the local artists would be performed in White in the Moonlight. The door is open to them. A few of them have already indicated to us that they would be there performing. There's also a number of local bands here. You would have a great experience. The patrons would have a great experience in White in the Moonlight this year, and that's coming from all of us, consensus as the promoters. Actually, Mr. Peters said something about killing 2 cows or something. No questions from Mr. Peters? No questions from Mr. Peters from the media?
Right. So we just want to thank you, and we are here to reach consensus, because we think it's very important, and I think we've had very good questions. I like the way that we wrapped up with the question from my lady from WITML in terms of what to look forward to. We're looking forward to having this matter resolved amicably. There's no reason why it can't, and the rest of the issues we're going to have to park for the time being until we can deal with them, because there are some issues that we have to clarify between the 2 acts.
So when I go and say there may be White in the Moonlight, no, I am not wrong.
No, you're not wrong.
And this is just the checks that I told you I did. You know, people say we don't make contributions, but this is just a couple of the checks showing that we do make contributions. All right. One of the other things that, let me just touch on that like
your nationality, my friend.
Yes.
What is your nationality?
People refer to me as foreigners, and it saddened me that actually people in the Spice Pass Corporation would talk about these foreign promoters. Here's my birth certificate, the long form. All right, take note, political pundits. This is the long form. All right, Fontenoy St. George's, grew up in Grand Mall. Here's a copy of all my Grenadian passports.
All the old ones?
All the expired ones issued over the years. Yeah. All right, all my passports. I'm a Grenadian by birth. My navel string was buried up the byway on that Alhambra tree. And I have 3 years to retire, and make no doubt about it. Once I retire, I will be back here in the US. People talk about, in Grenada, back here in Grenada. People talk about us foreigners coming here and make money. Listen, we work in the US, invest the money. I have investment in Grenada. It absolutely makes no sense to spend money from the US to do something here, and then you will take the money from here to bring it back to the US when I got to pay a mortgage here every month. I do have land that I have to pay here for. I do have a mortgage here. So why would I take money back to the US? And not only take money back to the US does have a limit. You can only take $10,000 back into the country. All right? And I'm in law enforcement, so I'm not willing to take any chance to go outside of this realm. So whatever money we invest from the US, I can tell you, make no doubt about it, it does stay in Grenada here, in the bank here, to get reinvested in the economy.
Someone was asking why the ministry decided to stop the work permit.
That was addressed by Dr.
Let me just say again, in conclusion.
Let me answer this to you. I mean, there's a legal answer and there's a sensible answer. We have every confidence that the Minister of Labour and the Ministry of Labour will do the right thing and grant the work permits. And let's be clear, while it's a government discretion, let's be frank about what we're talking about. For you to allow, for example, one Trinidadian band to come in and another band not to come in, when there's no rational basis for it. And as Dr. Antoine said, you have to be mindful that at carnival time, our artists go to Trinidad, our artists go to Crop-Over. Lava Man probably lives in St. Vincent. If you start that trend, and this is not something new, you know.
No.
I'm sure if you guys speak to the current Minister of Information, well, I know the government has been reshuffled, I hope he's still the current Minister of Information. He will tell you that when he was in charge of the Calypso Association and so on, he too objected to Red Rat and so on coming. And I'm sure 10 or 15 years down the line, he will tell you that his perspective on those things have changed. Because you don't protect your culture. You don't make your artists better by telling them they don't have competition. You become better by interacting with the competition, by seeing what the competition is doing, and from learning and becoming better. If there weren't Trinidadian artists coming in here and performing and so on, then our artists would not have been able to raise the bar and raise the level. So I don't even want to get into the legal issues about the work permits. We are confident that the government, let's put it this way, it's in their interest to grant the work permit. They get paid.
Absolutely.
They get paid the revenue, even if it may very well be that these artists don't need work permits at all. Right. But if people have applied, you're getting administrative fee, you're getting paid. It is not for the minister to, in fact, you get into a fight created by the Spice Mass Corporation. The artists, if promoters want to hire the artists and pay the work permits, the government makes money, the promoters make money, people have a better time, Carnival is bigger and better. And so we hope that that is the picture in which it will be viewed, rather than this narrow picture of saying it's only one event. Thanks.
Thank you.